podestas conditum. Medieval drama was born in the church. The church itself had symbolic meaning, referring to the body of Christ. Church symbolism from the early Middle Ages was highly spectacular, affecting the visual imagination. The same can be said about the rituals in the church and the dressings and vestments and requisites which were used for the Catholic rituals. The celebration of the Mass had a kind of dramaturgy, almost a theatrical character. Some of the rituals had exact dramatic counterparts, like the Easter plays or the Christmas plays. The most ancient church play is the Visitation of the Three Marys at the Sepulchre of Christ. Soon, these church rituals became rather complicated dramaturgical performances within the churches. At the beginning, the scenes were performed by monks, including saints' plays, like these references to Saint Thomas Becket's martyrdom. A special type of spectacle was the Dance of Death, which was initiated by medieval monks as a reference to the Black Death. Later on, the performances moved out from the church to the streets and the squares of the town, sometimes inspired by rather different kind of public spectacles. The streets of the medieval cities became the sceneries of the famous medieval mystery cycles, which were performed very often on movable stages, the so-called pageants. These cycles would include the whole story of creation, a cosmic history, from the creation of the world, the fall of Adam and Eve, till the Last Judgment. Other sorts of spectacles in the cities included fairs and markets which were blessed by the bishop. At these fairs and markets, wagon stages were set up on which biblical scenes or other scenes were shown. A pageant showing the story of Adam and Eve. Devils and other monsters were favorite characters of medieval mystery plays and the moralities. One of the important iconographic elements was the hellmouth, that place through which the damned souls go into hell. We find the representations of hellmouth on very many miniatures and wall paintings dating from the Middle Ages, and it appeared also on the medieval stage. This is the famous wall fresco of the church of Stratford-upon-Avon, what Shakespeare could also see. This is a reconstructed morality stage. This is how the first scene of Everyman could be seen. The Renaissance brought about the birth of the perspectivic stage. But it did not become widespread in England till the 17th century. Rather, booth theatres were set up on marketplaces, which later developed into the inn-yard theatre. The English Renaissance public theatre, or as we know Shakespeare theatre, developed out of the inn-yard structure. This is how the first theatre looked, which was replaced by the Globe later, and after the burning of the Globe in 1613 it was rebuilt in a slightly different structure. The Blackfriars represented the other type of theatre, which was called private.
The private theatres originated from the refectories of dissolved monasteries. This is why the first private theatre was called the Blackfriars, which used to be a Dominican monastery. The most famous public theatres were the Theatre, the Swan, the Curtain, and of course the Globe. The new Globe is not only a playhouse, but also has a rich exhibition about Renaissance London, the Elizabethan age, and the theatres, including Shakespeare's career.
and it risked it. And risked it, it's terribly difficult because it wasn't only the archaeological remains that we had, but we had
About 1650. So it was enormous growth time, and of course that meant that the marshy land was used to build things on. And the early building consisted of the bear baiting house, the bear and bull baiting houses, which gave a kind of private identity. It was in the liberty of the king, it was outside the city control.
It's there.
But if we look after the theatre, it will still be here in 400 years. If you go tomorrow or today to Stratford upon Avon, where Shakespeare was born, his house is still there. His mother's house, Mary Arden House, 500 years old, no problem. It lasts forever, right? So don't worry about the cracks in the wood. Look at the big splits in the wood here and there. That's just the natural drying or seasoning of the oak. That's what happens, not a problem. And held together with wooden pegs. Wood. There is no nails or metal in the frame. That's because oak contains an acid called tannin, and it will rot metal, so it has to be oak. They call them the penny stinkards, because they smelt so bad. One reason is London was not modern as it is today. It was a medieval city, very rich, growing fast, but insanitary, very overcrowded. And the lower class people, working men and women of London, did not wash that often. They did not have baths or showers at home. They had a complete bath twice a year, by tradition, one in the summer, one in the winter, right? Why have more? You had fleas and lice jumping around, that was quite common. People eating raw garlic because they felt that kept disease away. So the Axis called them the garlic reptiles. Nice and quiet. Aircraft. We don't have any traffic. Up here, you've got that big pointed roof. and it's known as the attic or the gable, but technically it is a pentis roof. Pent, point, and pentis is where we get penthouse. It means the top story.
Not only the theatre was spectacular, the whole medieval and Renaissance life was theatrical. Tournaments, pageants, royal entries, processions all had a set choreography. Chivalry and tournaments were popular even in the times of Elizabeth. It was called tilt or tilting. Entertainment, fight, and majesty all had hierarchical and iconographically charged shows. This is how the ruler entered the parliament session. A royal entry of Queen Elizabeth. This is the trial of Mary Stuart, Queen of Scots. Funerals were also highly spectacular and followed a strict dramaturgy. This is Philip Sidney on his deathbed, and this is the funeral procession of Queen Elizabeth. Country festivities and folk traditions also contributed to the visual culture of the age. Even magic and witchcraft had their visually determined rituals.